Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about games with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And today, we are continuing on with our mini-series to cover some games that are smaller and that we personally play and enjoy, that we think are really cool, but maybe don't always get the recognition or notice that they deserve online. Recently, some stuff happened in Age of Sigmar where people were sort of asking what other stuff was out there, if they were looking for some alternatives for a bit, and that's what started this series. But I'm going to be honest, the community reaction to the stuff we've put out so far has been so incredibly, overwhelmingly positive and interested in more that we're just going to keep on going with other games we deeply enjoy. And that means we have to talk about the game spruiked to me by none other than Scott, the Miniature Maniac, ASOIAF, the Miniatures game, otherwise known as A Song of Ice and Fire, the Miniatures game. The name needs work, but the game is pretty great.
The name does need work. Holy.
Oh, good lord. Whew. ASOIAF. Wow. That's a mouthful. We're just probably going to call it Song for the rest of this video, as a lot of the community does, because it gets cumbersome. But this is a game that we've played for a couple of years now, actually.
Mm-hmm. We're towards the back half of like a pretty lengthy break on the game.
Which we'll talk about.
Yes.
But I actually bought this up during the pandemic. Maybe even just a little pre-pandemic, just because I really enjoy the Night's Watch and the books, and I wanted to paint those minis. And then just so happened that after a long time of waiting, other people noticed the game existed and wanted to try it as well. And that led to us furiously playing this game in our own play group for a while. And then I also did one, maybe two shop. I think, did we actually do two shop leagues? Where I played ongoing for one or two leagues at our local game store. So got a fair number of games under my belt. Got a fair amount of experience. And it's a game that I wholeheartedly am willing to pitch, especially following some recent developments, which we'll get to. But the way we like to break these down is first, when we're going to pitch a new game, we've got to talk about the lore. What is the lore pitch for these games? And y'all, I don't know how else to say it. It's the Song of Fire and Ice books. Like, you know the books. We all know the books. We all know the meme of when's the next one coming out.
Mm-hmm.
George, please.
You've seen Game of Thrones. Like, you've watched House of the Dragon. Like, you've experienced Jon Snow. Like, you know what happens. Like, it's a dark fantasy setting with, like, dudes fighting other dudes in a bunch of houses that are fighting each other. Like, you know what Game of Thrones is. Everyone knows what Game of Thrones is. More people probably know what Game of Thrones are than knows what 40K is. To be honest.
I don't even think that's probably. I think that's definitely true. Because around me, like, I live in Kentucky. So, like, a lot of the people who I meet in, like, work life or family life are not nerds at all. Very much so. Not nerds. Really not into a lot of the nerd culture stuff. Mm-hmm. Know absolutely nothing about it. But they know Game of Thrones. Because the show just had that much reach that even, like, total normies ended up getting a little bit into it. So it's really well known. I think in terms of IP, this is only second to Star Wars. But, you know, everybody knows. But I did write a lore thing for Star Wars, so I wrote one for Song of Ice and Fire, in case you've never heard of the critically acclaimed TV show.
Except for the last season.
I'd actually... Wow, no. I felt the call of the void to spread my thoughts, and I won't do that, John. And I won't do that.
Read the books, kids. It's way better.
I actually don't know if that's necessarily true either. That's too spicy. Moving on.
We can't say it, because the books aren't done. Continue.
In the land of Westeros, a new darkness rises far beyond the iced wall that protects the northern borders. Rime-coated undead creep in the shadows, causing the winters to grow longer, and the powers south of the wall to begin to position for power as desperation sets in. Schisms are made in families, friendships are pushed to betrayal, armies are bolstered, dragons are raised, and war breaks out all across the realm of Westeros. And that's pretty much the elevator pitch. You are going to be playing as these factions, the stuff that you know from the show, this is based off of the books, not the TV show. So there's going to be a lot of characters that you have not seen if you've only watched the TV show. Or you might see characters that you recognize from the TV show from name and what they do, but they look different than how you picture them. That's, again, because this is based off of the books rather than the TV show. So likenesses are derived that way. So, assuming you haven't watched Game of Thrones, you should. That show's great. It's really good. I know there's like a hesitancy to watch critically acclaimed stuff, but it's really good. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. At least the first 5 seasons are baller. And then come back. Game pitch, though. Game pitch. If you're into this at all, if you're into this world at all, holy crap, I think it really really shines on the tabletop. So you are going to pick a faction, and you are going to play a faction as your army. There's 8 of them, and they're pretty nicely distinct from one another. Distinguished from one another, if I do say so myself. So, John, give me the quick rundown of what we could expect.
So, currently, because they are planning on releasing more, there are 8 houses. There is Martells, Greyjoys, Targaryens, Baratheons, Free Folk, which are not a house, but they are the Northmen. Night's Watch, which again aren't a house, but they are the ones who stand on the wall. Lannisters, Starks, and lastly, in the newest faction, House Bolton, which is a neutrals faction. On top of that, there's a ton of neutrals units for things that don't really fit from the world, like from the books, in any of these factions that can be taken by any faction. These are called neutral units. So you're basically going to pick one of these 8 houses, and you're going to play that as your faction. And from there, you're going to build up, you're going to pick like a commander, and you're going to have all the characters and the units, and they're all going to make this like really well-structured army on the table. And it's a rank and flank game, as you would expect from a low fantasy setting game, in which you are fighting over territory or doing things. Like you can do reenactments from the books, but to be honest, much like with Star Wars Legion, they sort of just throw that you want continuity out the window. They just kind of let whatever fight whatever. Like, the Free Folk will fight the Lannisters, the Baratheons will fight other Baratheons, like, the Starks sometimes fight other Starks, like, the Boltons will fight Martells, like, it is what it is.
I think it's something you just sort of have to get over for the sake of the game running well. Like,
yeah,
that's the level of disconnect that's just necessary in hard, big IPs like this.
Yeah, it's like you have to have a level of a suspension of disbelief for many of these games that have like very set, structured IPs. Things like 40K are sort of built and written around the idea that they're going to fight each other. Most stories don't work well when that happens.
No, you want to have some friction, but not outright war. But you could come up with it on your own. It's fine. I've never had a matchup where my brain just totally broke and wouldn't allow it.
Yeah, and so there's really, when you're building your army, there's 2 big types of units. There's combat units, which are like set in squares, like square bases with models inside of them. Whether it's like a big monster or cavalry or like a block of like infantry, they all have unique sized bases, but those are called combat units. You take a bunch of them. And you also have things called NCUs, which are non-combat units, in which play on something called an NCU board, which we'll get into later. And these are used to represent a lot of the politics that you experience in Game of Thrones, or like logistics, or like the more drama-y elements that's shown on the game is like an NCU minigame, essentially, that is off the table and non-combative.
Yes.
That influences the combative part of the game, which I think is very smart and very ingenious, and one of the more unique and interesting things about this game.
Yeah, because, I mean, for anybody who's read the books, who's watched the show, I mean, I don't think in my brain there's another IP or another story which shows how powerful political positioning can be, and how you could be damned by it. I mean, there are some characters in the books who never lost a battle. Not once. Not one. They won every fight they were ever in and still lost the Game of Thrones and died because they lost the political game. All of that on the field positioning meant nothing because you lost at court. and it's really hard to make that work at a minis game. But like, wrote a mechanic to pull it off.
And then the final sort of like pillar in the game, because you've got combat units, non-combat units, is tactics cards. And tactics cards is a hand of cards you use when you're playing the game that have different triggers and happen at different times. Some on your turn, some on your opponent's turn, some after certain things happen. And what makes up these tactics cards and your tactics deck is who you pick to be your commander, mixed with the base cards in your faction. So if I take Victarion from Greyjoys, with the Greyjoys cards, I get tactics cards that fit his more aggressive playstyle in with the tactics card deck of Greyjoys, which also play like a sort of tradey, attrition-y, trade-up style to make that sort of force combined. Which adds another level of complexity to this game that is very fun and, quite frankly, addictive. Because you can sort of like switch in and out commanders with the same units for the most part and just play completely differently. Which is fun, right? That's fun. And that's the core of the game, right? Like that, and you just build up to 40 points, because that's the point size, and you play.
And building up those lists are pretty easy because there is an app for this game called War Council that they update. It's free.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay anything. Yeah. You just download it to your phone, and there you go. It's your list builder. It can even track your miniature collection if you're into that. And see it all right there. It's very nice.
Yeah, and like time-wise, playing one of these games, I think we got to a point where we were playing them in about an hour.
Yeah,
About an hour and a half.
Once we both knew our army rules very well. Because this game uses a system of universal keywords, there's less rules looked up than in some other games, where we both have a unit that works kind of similarly, but the wording is very nuanced, and the triggers maybe go off at an odd time, and we got to go looking for FAQs and stuff to see which pops when, and how does it work, and what's the exact wording. It's just, you learn your faction-based mechanics, you learn the keywords, and then you're basically off to the races. And it just makes this game pretty quick to get through.
Yeah, and on top of that, like, it's an alternating activation game, like most modern games tend to be. So it feels really engaging. Like, this game plays really quickly. If you're a fan of Conquest, like we talk about on the channel, it plays oddly similarly. A little bit tangent, like not quite like Conquest. But close enough that I would suggest if you like Conquest and haven't tried this, you might want to take a look if you want something that's like quicker and maybe like a little bit
more bite-sized, more approachable, maybe.
Yeah. And if you're a Song of Ice and Fire player and you're looking for like another suggestion, also check out Conquest. Like they're very close. They're both fantastic games. I plan on playing both of them.
It's a whole thing. And obviously, as we've mentioned, we've talked about this on the show before. I'm going to make this disclaimer again, because we make this on every time we talk about a game that we enjoy and pitch to people. None of the games that we pitch are perfect games. It doesn't exist. If there was a perfect game on the market, it would dominate the market, and we would all adore it. It would be universally played, and it's never going to happen. When you're trying to make a game and you're making game design decisions and directions, you're going to gain some stuff that's positive for those decisions you're making. You're also going to create some drawbacks in other areas. It is unavoidable. It is going to happen. That's okay. So we don't want to go into this section and make it seem like we hate this game we're pitching for some reason, because the internet seems very all or nothing at times. Rather, we just want to give you some cons to let you know if this might not be for you, depending on your particular preferences and your wants, what you're looking for, and some pros to see if this is something that you might be into that fits your vibe, your flavor, and what you want. So take all of this with a grain of salt. It's just some things to get your, juices flowing and to get your gears turning so you don't maybe waste some money that's tight for most of everybody right now.
Yeah, and ultimately our goal is just sort of inform you about options you can play and let you make the decision. We're not here to convince you, we're here to inform you with our experience. Yep. If that makes sense.
Because for us, really, the big thing is, I want to expose you to games that are outside of your normal spectrum. And maybe you look at this and go, wow, there are pieces of that I like. It's not for me. But maybe in looking into it, you find another game that is for you from another smaller creator. And just getting people to go looking in and of itself is the win for me. So we'll start with the cons. Because I always think starting with the cons is a little easier because they're generally faster and we can explain our way through them. So first, if you like building miniatures and converting miniatures, and that side of the hobby, you're a miniaturist, you want the big, the complicated, the vast minis that you're going to personally get bashed off for yourself, or build out of the box with a ton of built options, this game might not be for you. Because all of these miniatures come pre-built. You don't build anything. They come in sort of like plastic holders that keep them safe in transport. You pick them right out. They are already on their base, and you slot them into a movement tray, and they're ready to go on the table.
Yeah, and partially because of that, they aren't what I would call highest quality miniatures. Some of them still look very good. Like, I still like the miniatures I have. I still think they look good. But they are one-piece solid miniatures that are generally, like, not 3D printed. They're injection molded, I believe. And so they aren't as complicated as other miniatures, which can also be a pro for you if you don't like painting a ton of really complicated miniatures. But it's, know that going in. Like, this is not like a extremely detailed miniatures game.
Mm-hmm.
But it's pre-built, which can also be a boon.
Again, you gain some area, you lose some area. Make your choices where you will. If you hate building minis, that's great for you. Just
yes,
put it out. COD. We've mentioned this one when we talked about Star Wars Legion. This is an inherent con, I believe, when you play in a system that has an IP that is this strong. Although I would say this one is more dominating here than in Legion. This game is quite restrictive narratively, consisting largely of named heroes from the books with what feels like little room to make your own custom stuff. Looking at my own Night's Watch list, I would say 80% of the heroes I use, maybe more, are named heroes that are unique. Maester Aemon, Jon Snow, Corran Halfhand, all of them are named, and there's not a lot of room to make my own custom stuff. And if you're a narrative gamer and you love making your own custom stuff, you might struggle to do that here because of how beloved the books are and how well solidified many of the characters are.
Yes. And, like, again, that is a double-handed sword. Some people they want to just play with a thing that is well established and they know, and they can just play.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another con is that the game updates not extremely frequently. There is about 6 months between each update, small update, and then they do one big update every year. If you play something like 40K or you play something like Age of Sigmar, you are used to updates happening almost monthly at this point. That's not here. Full disclosure, like I played Greyjoys, and when I was playing Greyjoys when we first got into the game a couple years ago, they were not in a good spot. They pretty much had one way of playing them, and that one way of playing them wasn't very fun or good. And it didn't get fixed for quite a long time. And then when they did get fixed, the cards were not available as they all got updated. And so I put the game down for a little bit and came back. It does seem like they have started to address that issue. I don't want to say that they have fixed that issue because I don't have enough experience with it yet to be able to say that. But it seems like it's a thing they have tried to increase their engagement with, according to other members of the community.
Yeah, if you're someone who wants constant hot fixes or FAQs or like a really razor's edge developer update cycle, you will not find it here. That is just not a thing that's going to happen. Truly, you get one big update a year, and sometimes that update might not address whatever main quibble you have with the game, which means you're going to be waiting a long time to get that quibble addressed. When I was first started playing, it was the Mance Raider bubble and an endless drowning number of wildlings, essentially. I'm sure there's something else that it is now. It's just the state of games. It will get addressed eventually, but you might be waiting a minute. Um, and lastly, John mentioned this, but this is the big one. It's actually why we stopped playing for a long, long time. As we mentioned, this game requires physical cards that you're going to put in sleeves and shuffle and draw like you're playing Magic the Gathering. You're going to draw these cards and then spin them to do effects on the table while you're playing your battle against your opponents. It's pivotal. You have to have them for the game to run. However, when they do these big updates once a year, they updated these cards. And over time, they have updated a lot of these cards from when they sold card packs. Card packs, I think, were from 2020 or 2021. I'd have to go pull out mine from the closet to see. But they have updated a significant amount of these cards since then. And until very recently, I'm talking the past couple of weeks, there was not a way to go buy new cards. You could not buy new updated cards. On the website, they did put out PDFs that you could print and on printer paper glue or like tape to Magic the Gathering cards and put them in sleeves and what have you and make proxies. But for me, it never quite felt right. It never felt the same. It felt kind of janky. Or if you wanted to go on Etsy, you could maybe try to find a third-party printer of your cards to get you the cards you need. But again, they're going to update cards in about a year from the time that you get those. You're going to have to go back to your proxy person and get more cards again. And it always just seemed incredibly weird that this thing that you needed to have for this game, they weren't selling. However, they've just announced now they're selling them. They're selling them by faction. They're also selling them by update bundle. So that means if you're new to, let's say, Lannisters, you're a brand new Lannister player. You want all the Lannister cards that are new and ready to go. You buy the bundle for $20. They send you all the Lannister cards. You're ready. You're good to go. Or if you have existing Lannister cards that were updated from the last batch, you made your own proxies, what have you, and you only want the new cards that were changed, that bundle is even cheaper, and they just send you the changed cards. It's all done through Forgefire, much better.
Mm-hmm.
So this con is now being addressed. I hope it is truly just put to bed and that this is no longer a problem, because this was the big thing that made our group stop playing.
Yeah. Like, it was that the updates came out, but there was no physical way to sort of keep up with it without having to put in, like, a bunch of extra work, which then means you have to, like, make sure you're printing the right things, and then you also double-check your opponent to make sure they're using the right version of the cards, which if you're not a person who's, like, sort of keeping up with a thing, and you just sort of play every once in a while, is really hard to, like, do.
Yes.
So, like, if I'm playing with brand new, fresh, updated cards, and you're playing with cards from a year ago, and things feel weird because of it, like, well...
It's a thing.
That sucks.
Also because a lot of their balance is in the cards. And they will buff and nerf individual cards to make commanders worse or better. It's a thing. Alright. First pro. John, hit me.
Okay, so, first positive thing I'm going to say, right? This game has less complexity than many other games. It doesn't mean the game is easy. It does not mean that the game is not deep. It does not mean that the game doesn't have tactical play to it. The game, on a base level floor, is much easier to learn than almost every other wargame. Things do very clear, concise things. Everyone uses the same kind of tokens. There's not a ton of different tokens. There's just a kind of a set number of tokens.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone uses tactic cards. The way they use them makes it get some complexity and deepness, but it all makes sense when you play it. Everything has clear, obvious triggers. Everything has clear, obvious stuff on the cards. Like, the game plays very streamlined, very simply. It doesn't have, like, system upon system upon system to understand and know. The missions are very easy, like, well-designed. Overall, the game, you can pull out the starter box. Your opponent can pull out their starter box and play against each other with the rulebook in the box, and probably know what you're doing by the end of your first or second game.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, and almost to entirety. Like, you don't need to play, like, 10 practice games to know what you're doing. You can play a game or two, really know what you're doing, and then start being able to understand how to start getting towards mastery at that point. It is very quick to pick up, and I think that's actually the biggest pro with the game, is that especially if you have friends who want to try wargaming, but it can be very overwhelming, this is a nice game to start them with, because it's forgiving. It's a very forgiving game system. It doesn't really, unless you play certain competitive lists against extremely not competitive armies, which is very hard to do in this game too, because the margins are very slim. You'll have a pretty good time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of alternatives, but for me, if you asked me what I think the most approachable miniature wargame is on the market right now for someone who is maybe less rules inclined and is kind of nervous about it, I think I would say A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, and like I actually think A Song of Ice and Fire beats out Star Wars Legion as well, simply because of the upgrade system in Star Wars Legion compared to here with the tactics cards being the customizable part.
Yeah, because in Star Wars Legion, you've got to look at a sea of different variably priced upgrades with niche keywords added in and stuff. And here it's just like, here's my one stack of cards I always take in my deck because I play Night's Watch. Now here is my little additive stack because Jon Snow's my general. Like, it's
Shuffle and play.
You're good to go. Also, the tokens. Mechanically, they have stuff like Panicked or Vulnerable. Very simple. Panicked means that when you roll leadership, if I put a panic token on you earlier, I did something that was very big and spooky, and then you go to roll leadership, I can burn that token that I put on your unit and say, hey, reroll all of your successes for me, please. And you just reroll your successes.
The token's removed.
Now let's say I put a vulnerable on you, and then I hack at you with my Night's Watch swords. You roll your defenses. After you roll your defenses, and I can take that token and burn it and say, hey, reroll all of your successes, please. And you reroll all your successes. It is incredibly simple. It's just rerolls. It's rerolls with different sort of triggers on them. However, adds a nice level of depth without adding a lot of mechanical complexity. Really elegant stuff like that keeps this game feeling easy. Reroll your successes is pretty easily understandable by most people.
Yes, and that's sort of like baseline. It goes deeper than that. There's a lot more interactions you can do, but that beginning part is just really easy.
Yes, I think the floor is low, and that is a huge pro here. Huge pro. Second, in addition to being easy to understand mechanically in terms of like the core mechanics, the game's also incredibly affordable in terms of price. Good lord. This may be the best value starter boxes in the business, bar none. At least right now, as of recording. I would love to see one that's even more value than this. Please, genuinely, send it to me if you know them. But for example, currently the Night's Watch starter box is $85 on Amazon at time of recording. And out of that Night's Watch starter box, you can build a full standard 40-point, that's tournament level army. That's like 2,000 point equivalent in terms of Age of Sigmar or 40k numbers. Out of the starter box alone. And it's not weird orthogonal garbagey stuff that no one actually wants to play. They're good units. There's just a lot of them in the box that you get to start the army with. As well as all of the tokens that you're going to need. As well as all the terrain that you're going to need. As well as all the measuring sticks that you're going to need. As well as all the objective cards that you're going to need. As well as all
an NCU board.
Yes, and your NCU board. And your combat cards. Like, all of it. Right there.
Yes.
It's
yes.
all self-contained. It's right, bam, bing, boom. You're ready to go. And they also all have rule books in them. Again, they've updated it since. You could go get them digitally on the app. But they put all of it in the box. With the tournament standard army. That's nutty amounts of value.
Yeah, and like some of them will be slightly under 40 points. That's okay. But the fact is you get close enough that you can play the game. And I don't think of another miniatures game functionally that you and your buddy go to a store at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You can both pick off the shelf the house you want to play. Take those saran wrapped boxes of models over to a table after you've bought them. Rip them open those boxes, pull out the miniatures that are pre-built, put them in their bases, put them on a table, and play against your buddy with the thing you just bought off the shelf. That day, that afternoon, be able to learn and play that game in less than 2 hours and feel happy about it. And feel like you know how the game works and be able to probably even play another game depending on how late you and your buddy want to stay up.
Yeah. I mean, like, in terms of Ash from Grilly Miniatures Games, put this out there as like a standard, but like, does it fit the Christmas morning standard of like, can you and your little brother each get a box on Christmas morning and like open it up and be really excited and then be playing by Christmas afternoon? Hell yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of war games like don't work that way. Right? Like 40K, absolutely not. AOS, no. Conquest, generally not. Like many of these games don't do that. They just don't. And when even if they do that technically, they're not normally balanced enough to really be able to do that in a way that feels fulfilling. Here really kind of feels that way. That is probably the biggest like push factor here, is that it works that way. Like this is a game you can show your entire group of friends who play like these games together and be pretty okay with it for a fairly cheap entry. I think it's rivals Star Wars Legion in cheapness. And I was just looking it up. Like an average cost of a box of dudes is $30.
Yeah.
If that. Like $25 to $30. Nowadays, that's good. That's really good.
That's incredible.
Like half a cost of a box of Space Marines.
God, it's nuts. It's really good. Truly, this is, in my opinion, the most approachable miniature war game, and that's part of the reason why. And not only does it like meet the Christmas morning requirement, but good Lord, it like windmill dunks over top of all of its competition in that category. From the next pro, like now we're going to get into game design stuff that we just like.
Yes.
But John, we got to talk about the handed card system.
Yeah, so the tactics card system makes you playing this game feel like playing old Warhammer Fantasy mixed with Magic the Gathering. Like, you have, like, really cool trigger effects on these cards that allow you to do, like, oh, you did this thing, you activated my trap card, I do this thing. Or I am pulling off this combo by stacking in these 3 cards. Or, like, maybe I have an ability for my character that when I used it, it allowed me to, like, shuffle parts of my hand away. Like, put parts of my hand away to draw more cards to set myself up. And I'm now going to wait for you to fall for my trap. And now I'm going to combo out on you on your turn and cause problems for you. And now you've wasted an activation triggering my trap. And now I'm going to activate on you. And I'm going to snap you to death. Snap you in half like a twig. It's very good. Like, it's a very simple system. It's just playing cards on triggers. But it impacts the game in such a way that is interesting, that keeps you coming back for more and makes you go, oh, wow, that's neat. That's cool.
Yeah, I think it could be a thing that could end up cumbersome if you're not careful in terms of design, because there's just so many options in terms of like base cards and then also all of the commander cards, which every commander hero is going to need a little stack of. So it could get overwhelming if you weren't careful, but for me, what really helps is the way they lay out these cards is so well done. Right at the top of the card, there is a line that is in bold that will say on your card when it triggers. So for example, it might say, play when one of your units is targeted by an enemy attack. Oh, well, that's very easy. I know right when to play that card. And it allows me to take some of my cards and put them into little orders in my hand of, My enemy is not attacking me right now, so these two cards I'm just going to put at the end, and I don't have to think about them because I know they're currently not an option because it's my attack phase. And it lowers that mental load just overwhelmingly so to make it easier because you know that some of these things just aren't going to proc right now.
Yeah, and like when you compare it to something like stratagems, for instance, in 40k, where you might have 12 stratagems to pick from. That might be a high number, it might not be. But all of them have different points value costs, and all of them have like these different things that you're trying to compare constantly, and they trigger at certain times, and you have to sort of memorize them all. To have like 4 cards in your hand, and to be able to go, these all trigger at these very specific times, and I only have to worry about the 4 things that are in my hand right now. Easy.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
And you have your reminders, because they're cards, right there in front of you. So if you ever go, like, oh, what's the wording on that one ability? Oh, there it is, right here. Like, you can reference it yourself very easily. It's very nice. It's a great piece of design. It takes the memory load off the brain, which again makes this game feel easier, even in the complex parts. Very well done. And it also gives some commanders a lot of power that is totally disconnected from their ability to kick butt on the tabletop. I mean, so often in other games we have played, the only thing that matters about a hero was how many like damage it can deal out a turn. Can it throw big fireball? Can it cut half your army down in an attack phase? Like, those are the only 2 things that matter in some games, or at least it feels that way. Here, matters less if they have an incredible stack of cards that you want to play in their hand. You know, maybe, God, if I'm going to get this name wrong, maybe Corin Halfhand isn't all of that killing on the table, but his cards let me survive everything. So I take him anyway.
Yeah, and I think that carries over into an even like more interesting part of the game, right? The tactic cards are very, very cool. But the other thing that is very interesting is the NCU board. That takes that concept of non like fighting characters and amps it up to 11, right? These are models that you bring that have unique data sheets, like individual abilities and stuff that they have, that do not touch the battlefield at all ever. They can only be played on the NCU board itself, which is effectively like a court where people are vying for like different buffs. And when you place one of these NCU things, like miniatures on that spot on the board, it has an effect that goes off. And they themselves have unique effects on each of them that really supports who they are as a character in the story. And that might replace the effect they're dropping on. Some of them even go off when your opponent interacts with the NCU board. Yeah. Greyjoys have one where if you take wealth, the little like sack of coins on the NCU board, I get a buff. I get a thing.
The Martells can poison an NCU board zone. To where, like, if they know that I'm going to want to go in a particular place, they could drop a poison on it to where then my character's going to slowly die over time. God, that's cool. Creating a little push and pull narratively. And some are just uber good at one zone. Like, for example, I never leave home without Maester Aemond. 1, because I love him in the show. But 2, he's so good. Maester Aemond is always like, he's not quite a doctor, but he's basically the doctor. He stitches all of these Night's Watch back together. So when he takes the buff that lets him heal people, he gets to heal even more people based on how hurt they are as he patches them back up and gets them back out there. And some even let you replace the effect of zones altogether. Which adds just a whole other layer of depth as we sort of play chicken for who's going to jump on the good zones or the bad zones first and in what orders.
Yeah, and it'll create interesting moments where like I might not want to drop on the zone that removes condition tokens because I know, say for instance, you're playing Boltons and Boltons put condition tokens on everything, and I really want to make sure I don't have a specific condition token on, say, my unit of Silence Men. So I want to bait out you playing that condition token on my Silence Men, knowing that they're a dangerous unit, and then I will place my NCU on the NCU board to remove that token, and then activate my silence spin to do their thing. So it adds another layer of like plans within plans that you're trying to make, if that's the thing you want to do. If you don't want to do that, there's lots of ways to interact with the NCU board that are sort of just like, yeah, no, I take this from you so you can't have it and I heal. Or no, I take this from you so you can't have it and I get a pillage token. Or I can go on here, and if I take this before you do, you can't choose the other two of the other ones, and you have to choose this other one that you don't want. Like, there's lots of ways to play around the NCU board, which I think is really the thing that really separates this the most from every other game. I actually wish this was implemented in more games in a similar way, of like characters that interact with each other on a not on the board state. It's very fun. It's very, very interesting.
I cannot undersell how much I friggin' love this invention. From like every now and then, I will just see a mechanic that I will see in a game, and my game design brain goes, "Holy hell! What an inspired creation! What a brand new thing that I have never thought of before." This is one of those times that the first time I played the NCU board happened to me. Like, my mind just, like, cracked open, and ideas started pouring out. Just because of how representative this is of the source material that we're trying to emulate. I mean...
Yeah, I think the best way to sort of describe this using, like, a Magic the Gathering reference is that the NCU board is the difference between playing Commander with one person and playing Commander with 4 people. So you're effectively, the game baseline is like playing a red deck versus a red deck. And then when you add in the tactics cards, it's like you're adding in green or like black to the mix. And then the NCU board is like blue and white. So you're starting to get all the flavors, but in different ways. And you kind of have to have each of these flavors in your list, no matter what army you're playing. So it forces you to learn how all of the mechanics work. So you can't just pick one of these mechanics to just not learn. Meaning you want to engage with all three, and all three sort of like teach you the game in a way that feels very mechanically fulfilling. And even though some things in the game might feel like gotchas, they don't. There's always, you feel like there's a way to do something about it because you can outthink your opponent and prevent it in the future. Like, there's always a way out.
Yeah, if I could see it coming. God, it's so good. It's so incredibly good. Some factions want to play the NCU board more. Some factions want to play the physical battle board more. Some strike like a real balance between the two. And it just really depends on your faction and your strategy. But everybody uses the NCU board. The question is just how. And I mean, it's Game of Thrones. You gotta use it. It's half the show. More than half of the show in the books is politicking. We're talking about making backdoor deals. It cannot be left out. If we're being honest, the fights are actually staggeringly rare. It's mostly a political game, and the NCU board oftentimes has won or lost me games because I made good or bad decisions around it. And that was on me. I could have played the game better, as is the lesson to be learned from the Game of Thrones TV shows and all the things I will not spoil in case people haven't watched it. But yeah, I love it. I cannot sing its praises enough. Hats off to the designers. Incredible job. Wonderful. And also, some factions add a whole other spot to the NCU board. Like Martell's add the water garden. It's freaking nutty. I love it. It's nutty in the best way, but it's nutty. So truly, like, y'all, if you're out there and you want a more approachable, streamlined, like a Game of Thrones-y kind of feel, I highly recommend looking into this game. It's not perfect. There is some friction. Take it as a whole and look into it. But if you are wanting to give it a whirl, there are Discord communities and stuff where you can find demo games. And also, if you and a friend are just more willing to kind of leap in feet first together and try it out, you won't have to spend a lot of money on that investment if you're kind of like on the fence between getting something or not. Overall, I think you're probably going to have a good time if you're down to have just like a little bit of strategic political clown fun. God, it's great. And And to be honest, it might be something that rotates back into our regular play sessions now that there are cards that we can buy. I don't know why it took so long.
I somehow have managed to collect 3 armies for this game that are sitting in my closet. So,
I have one for me. My wife also. I have Night's Watch because I love Night's Watch, and then my wife has Starks because she loves the Starks. And then I also have a Free Folk army, but we'll see if I keep that one.
I have a distinct feeling you won't be.
Probably not. But
So I have Targaryens, Free Folk, and Greyjoys.
But I'm diehard on the Night's Watch. You can't pull me away. My watch has not ended. That's a reference to the show, John, or the book.
Oh, I didn't know that.
What?
Sorry.
You haven't watched it? You should watch it. It's really fun. There's like a red
I
wedding.
absolutely have seen the entire show. Read all of the books. Like, what do you want from me?
John,
You should know me better by now.
I want to have a podcast mini-series where we only talk about every episode of the final season, and we flex our writing chops by rewriting all of the Game of Thrones final season, to where we have the same endings for every character, but we make it make sense to how they got there.
We can. Maybe it's bold of me to say, but I'm pretty sure there's already 2 white dudes who have made that podcast.
I'm like 98% certain that already exists, and it's why I do not say my opinions broadly, because Jesus, I'm sure it's covered. But for people out there, we are continuing the series. We're thinking about adding some other games. Currently, we are reading through Death Wizards from Starling Badger Games, so we can try to play that, which looks delightfully fun. We've also had some stuff recommended in the comment section. Malifaux popped up. It's one I actually have a gang of, because I demoed it at Gen Con. I haven't played enough of it to give it like a real run out there, but maybe I'll try to get a few games in just to like really sink my teeth into the modern setting. But we're looking to do more of these episodes to focus on cool games that people are playing. So if y'all out there have more ideas, put them down below. We are looking, we are reading them all, and we deeply appreciate them. And if you have questions or want help getting into one of the games we've talked about, the comments are open, as well as the Instagram, the Twitter, all those things. Feel free to reach out. We're happy to help y'all.
Yep. If there's anything specifically you want us to cover on the show, drop a comment. If you want to tell us your favorite house from Game of Thrones, drop a comment. If you want to like, awesome. We'll appreciate that. It's great. If you want to share this video with other people, maybe a group of friends that want to get into it, we really appreciate that too. If you haven't subscribed and want to, we also appreciate that. By no means do you have to do any of it. We're still going to make stuff. We'd love it if you stayed.
Much appreciated. But all of our opinions, bona fide and Kentucky Fried. We'll see y'all on the next one.